This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome back, everybody, to the X-Cast. As ever, the truth is in here. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast series that you're listening to, where we go through the X-Files feature film, the first X-Files feature film, 1 minute at a time. I'm your host today, Carl Sweeney, and you're listening to our coverage of minute 56 of the film, which begins at the 55-minute mark, with Mulder and Scully looking for evidence of a dig site. And this minute ends as they look at the new kids' playground that's conveniently been built. And to discuss this minute, I am joined by Caredwen Foley. Hey, Caredwen, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well. How are you?
Yes, I'm good, thanks. It's nice to re-team. We were together earlier in the film and this podcast series, so it's nice to be back. And we've got Mulder and Scully to talk about here, which I don't think we did, certainly the last few times we talked anyway. So, yeah, what did you make of this minute, Caredwen? What really jumped out at you?
I like that this is a nice opportunity for Mulder and Scully to regroup with the evidence that they have so far. It's helpful to have those, like, put ourselves in a new environment and try to start to synthesize, some of the evidence we've seen and map it onto whatever the environment is that we're in right now. So as they're kind of discussing, okay, we've got these set of infected, this body that's been infected with some virus of unknown origin. We've got these bone fragments that we think are representative of the same viral infection. And then we've also now got this dig site that doesn't really look like a dig site, but we've got some new evidence here to interpret, and we don't really know who it is we're dealing with here, but we've got some, like, sort of trace of where they've been. So it's nice to see these guys, starting to put the pieces together.
Yeah, I think this whole section of the film is probably my favourite, to be honest. And I don't just mean this scene. I mean when they go on to chase the tanker truck, when they go and into the domes where the bees come after them and so on. There's just something very uncanny about everything. Like, you have these ostensibly quite innocuous settings, but there's just something a little bit off about it, And I think just seeing them together, investigating, not being entirely sure what's going on, but making some headway is a lot of fun too. I think the first thing I noticed here, now this kind of overlaps with the previous minute, so I'm assuming that, whoever did the last episode might have touched on this, but this comes just after the scene with the Syndicate and Strughold, which ends with that with which he can't live without. Let's take away from Mulder what he can't live without, and then we get the cut to Scully. Mm-hmm. So this sequence on until what goes down. The audience has that kind of knowledge now, just from that juxtaposition that Scully's, they're coming after Scully.
Right.
So we've got that kind of foreboding feeling. I don't know. Do you think it's a shame that ultimately this is going to end up in a kind of Scully kidnapped story? Do you kind of regret that? Because I sort of wish Mulder and Scully had been together for the whole film in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I have sort of mixed feelings about it because as much as I don't really. It's a bummer how much that kind of particular trope gets used of, oh, okay, we need to get at our male protagonist, and so we're going to do a whole damsel in distress thing with this person who otherwise, is at least nominally supposed to be on equal footing with him, but kind of never gets treated that way. So that's it. I feel like it's kind of reinforces something that I don't love to see reinforced in media. It's hard for me to begrudge it too much because, like, I like the film. I like this film so much. I think they do a good job with it, and I don't think it's too, like, gratuitous. One thing that would have, I think, made me feel a little better about it is if it had kind of been woven, like that experience had been woven into subsequent seasons a bit more, especially since we have, that where we're situated in the series right now. These broader concerns about, like, abductees being kind of called back to the sites of these immolations and being kind of uniquely vulnerable in that way, which is another way in which the series is like kind of continually toying with Scully as uniquely vulnerable. But these two things, you know, their purposes are removed from each other, but they both culminate in, you know, Scully being kind of used as this like pawn in a way. And it would have been nice to see some engagement with the kind of psychological ramifications of that in future seasons. I've always been kind of surprised that those aspects of like Patient X and the Red and the Black don't really pop up that much coming into like season 6. So, you know, sort of strange that those things don't reverberate and that the events of, you know, the Antarctica disappearance don't reverberate.
Yeah, I think it's... I'm not wild about the trope either. I think, at the same time, I think a harmful trope can at times be executed well, which I think is what you're saying here.
Yeah.
I think it's mitigated somewhat by the fact that the film starts with Mulder. Like, she has to bail him out in the building when he's locked in, but it's not given the same degree of prominence. She doesn't have to work quite as hard to get him saved as he does at the end of the film. So yeah, I have mixed feelings about it too. I feel like after she's kidnapped, I feel like the film is not quite on the level it was before. That's just my personal view.
One thing I think that does kind of, I don't know if balance isn't the right word, but, you know, sort of counterweigh some of the concerns that that raises is the kind of Amor Fati trilogy and Biogenesis and Amor Fati, where, you know, here the Fight the Future is Mulder's opportunity to go to the ends of the earth to rescue Scully, and that's Scully's opportunity. You know, when she goes to the Ivory Coast to try to figure out, you know, how she's going to save Mulder from the effects of this artifact, I feel like she sort of gets to return the favor in a way. So I think that's and it's never made literal in that sense, but you know, I do feel like that sort of places a pretty even footing between them, and yeah.
I suppose I Want to Believe maybe is relevant there too, where her and Skinner. Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen I Want to Believe, but they kind of save him at the end there, don't they?
Yeah, I haven't seen I Want to Believe actually since it came out. I saw it in theaters. Really? I haven't seen it since. Yeah, I should probably do a rewatch.
Is that because you did not like it very much?
I mean, I didn't love it, but there have definitely been lots of individual episodes that I didn't love that I've rewatched, so I don't really have a good excuse. One thing about this minute that I do want to kind of comment on or express curiosity about, I don't know if you have a better like way of interpreting this than I do, is that I wonder if there is a deleted scene or something that explains something in here that seems a bit inexplicable to me, which is Mulder asks Scully whether she's sure that the virus that they saw in the bone fragments was the same as what they saw in the body in the morgue. And she talks about how both sets of bones were porous and that the virus was attacking them. So two things about that. One is that that's not necessarily like specific to any one virus. I mean, you can tell a smallpox corpse from it having, you know, porous indentations made in its bones. I'm not a forensic anthropologist. I just read a lot about terrible diseases. And the other thing is, I don't remember her getting to see the bones in the morgue. Like, they see the guy with the jelly body, and they see the bone fragments separately, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly that was referencing. So I don't know if I just, you know, missed a trick there, or if there's a deleted scene or something.
Yeah, I don't have an alternative explanation to give you, I'm afraid. I mean, was there nothing in that script you've got a hold of that kind of has been trimmed or something like that? I didn't
take note of anything, but
no.
Yeah, who knows? Might have been an earlier version or something that contained a little bit more. But yeah, it's inexplicable to me how Scully is so certain that those bone fragments, that the person those bone fragments belonged to had the same thing as the jelly man in the morgue. And then of course, like it's completely inexplicable to me how she like touches the jelly man's body with a gloved hand and no other protective equipment, and is like, we have a virus of unknown origin, and doesn't immediately like impose a quarantine on herself and Mulder and everybody else. Like, that just blows my mind. She's so uncareful about it in ways that are really uncharacteristic and ways that don't at all relate to like if you think about Drive, for instance, where they have they go to the property and figure out what the government experiments around like ultra low frequency sounds or something like that. But they all go in there in full like level 4 hazmat suits because they think they might be exposed to something. This is not that. She's just wandering around in her suit.
I feel like there's a scene in Emasculata where she's momentarily quite careless as well. I'd have to go back and check. But yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, what I was thinking when I watched this minute was that seems like quite a sparse playground, to be fair.
Yeah.
And there's actually a bit of a story to that, which is that they had significant production problems with this scene. So this was the last day they had at this location. They got there and they just didn't like the layout of the park. They hadn't been given enough lawn, so they had to frantically scramble to get lots more brought in. And that was tricky in and of itself, because apparently this is this is in the middle of nowhere somewhere. Apparently this location is next to where like Air Force families live. Apparently. So they had to truck in a load of stuff. It's the day they were due to leave. So it just sounded like a choreographic nightmare. But what Rob Bowman says on the commentary is, well, look, it was just so much stress that weirdly he felt no stress. You know, like it was, I don't know if you ever had that feeling, but so much had gone wrong, you were just kind of zen about it, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. That does feed really nicely into the story, though, because if it were a really good-looking, normal-looking playground, they wouldn't have any reason to go investigate it. It's like this weird, sparse, astroturf, non-irrigate, like, it doesn't look like it belongs, and that's a useful thing for our heroes.
Yeah, it sounds like it was just the size. Like maybe the first playground wasn't even big enough to cover the hole or something. It just didn't have quite the scale they wanted. But yeah, so seeing as we're talking about a kid's playground, I've taken the liberty, Caredwen, of preparing a quiz for you. I hope you don't mind.
Goodness, I love all the outside research you put into these minutes.
It's good. This is about the history of playgrounds.
Oh my goodness, okay.
So, just 3 questions. So, the idea of the playground originated in which country? Japan, Germany, or the United States? And just while you're thinking about that, let me say that my source on this is a website called espplay.co.uk and an article about the history of playgrounds. So, yeah, what do you think? Which country? And talk us through your logic, maybe, if you want to.
So I'm trying to think. I feel like I kind of want to discard the United States just because it feels like, you know, kind of low-hanging fruit in a way that makes it seem misleading. So I'm a little bit torn between Japan and Germany. I don't know why. I'm gonna say Germany. I just feel good about that choice. I don't know.
You should feel good about that choice. It is Germany. I don't have any. It's just one line in this article, so I can't give any supplemental information on that.
Oh man, yeah, I'm gonna Google it while you while you share the context.
Well, that's all I know, but I can tell you... Well, the next question... Okay, so question 2. The first purpose-built children's playground was built in a park in Manchester, England, but in what year? So 1759, 1809, or 1859?
Thank God this is multiple choice, because if you were just asking me to pull, like, that would be crazy. Can you... first purpose-built playground in Manchester, England. Can you tell me the years one more time?
Yep, 1759, 1809, or 1859.
I think I'm going to say 1859, and I'm going to say it because we've moved a little bit more into the industrial age by that point.
Bang on again, 2 out of 2.
Yes!
It is 1859. Well done. Yeah, again, I'm assuming that you're right on the rationale there, but that's all the information I have. But there we go. Final question then for today. Playgrounds were properly introduced in the United States when which president was in office? Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, or Woodrow Wilson?
I'm going to go with Teddy Roosevelt because it seems like the kind of, rugged individualism, like everybody needs to be very physically fit kind of thing that he would be into.
Okay, well, 100% score on this quiz. Well done. It is Teddy Roosevelt. I'm astonished. 1907, this was. So he was in office until 1909, I believe. I'm
so pleased with myself.
And allow me to read from his speech where he talks about this. So he said that city streets are unsatisfactory playgrounds for children because of the danger... because most good games are against the law, because they are too hot in summer, and because in crowded sections of the city they are apt to be schools of crime. And then he goes on to say, Basically, the playgrounds must be distributed over the cities in such a way as to be within walking distance of every boy and girl, as most children cannot afford to pay car fare.
Aww.
So, I mean, I can certainly endorse the sentiment behind that.
It's an extremely progressive rationale, and I wish that we had, structures in place for kids and families that were comparable to that. Libraries should all be in walking distance for kids, and playgrounds, and every other. Man, we gotta do a lot of work on this world.
Well, on that downbeat note, let's wrap up for today. So yeah, Caredwen, you'll be back with me next time for minute 57 as this scene continues. So I'm very much looking forward to that. That's all for today, listeners. Until our next episode, remember, as always, trust no one.
Previously on the We Made This Network. By projection light.
Dickinson also brings the audience's attention to a then unknown Audrey, who shines like a bright, pure beacon the whole film. It's quite amazing to think that only a year after this film, she would be cast in the film that would catapult her to superstardom and garner her an Oscar win. But it's also not difficult to believe. Her performance is so unaffected, as if she's living the part of Nora, which, as I've said, she almost had already. And it's also wonderful to see her dance, particularly during the audition scene towards the start of the film, where she flits and spins like an angel. It made me think of how she had danced during the war for audiences who were not allowed to clap due to the prohibition of public gatherings, but how she brought joy to those people as she brings joy to everyone who's watching this film every time she dances.
Don't say the C word.
Sex, drugs and rock and roll isn't a cliche. I've seen it all. There's a unique group of groupies that feel the need to collect, if that's the right term to use, like all of the band members, as in to sleep with all the band members and all of the crew.
Oh, wow. So they kind of, do they work their way from the top down, or do they work their way from the bottom up?
Yeah, get to whoever they can first. And it would always be me and one of the band members that they'd never get. And I was quite proud of that. I was like, yeah, I'm the one that you don't know about. So like, you can never brag. I'm not a bragging right.
That's pretty admirable. And is there a particular reason why you're not going to shag the groupies?
At the time, I was a virgin and I didn't want my first time to be with just some random lady on the road.
Bloody hell, that really is admirable. I think I'd have thrown my virginity at anybody, to be honest with you.
It got to the point a few years on, like, I was like, I'm thinking about it now. But no.
The time is now, a Millennium podcast.
The way that he's offered that job, I think he's done that before. It's not out of character for him to go into situations like that. I know it's done with a bit more levity earlier in the season in Goodbye Charlie, where he goes to speak to the social worker and he lays off all of his problems, which is a great scene in that episode. Yeah,
it's very hard to have that sort of levity when you're dealing with literal Nazis, to be fair.
Well, yeah, it's a slightly different take on the same kind of.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether the Mel Brooks sequence of that would probably be something to behold.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This Podcast Network.